to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to welcome back Dr. Todd Otten and Dr. Michael Hersh. Thanks for joining us today, Todd and Michael.
Absolutely. It's good to be back, Kim. Thank you.
So excited to be back here chatting with both of you. It's good to see you guys.
I'm overjoyed as well, so thanks for coming on. And by way of introduction, Dr. Todd Otten is a family medicine physician, co-author of Ripple of Change with his former patient, Joshua Judy, host of a great podcast bearing the same name, member of the executive team and traction team for Medicine Forward, and an all-around great guy.
Thanks, Kim. You're too kind.
You're welcome. And Dr. Michael Hersh is a full-time practicing gastroenterologist. He was co-host of the terrific podcast Doctors Living Deliberately with Dr. Arpita Gupta De Palma. And Michael has a year of blog posts at betterphysicianlife.com and a physician coaching business with the same name. And I can tell you for a fact, he's super awesome as Michael is my coach.
I'm gonna hire you to always do my introductions when I walk into a room.
Sounds like a plan. I'm available. I'm here for you guys. I gotcha. So anyway, I'm totally honored that I was the very first guest on Ripple of Change podcast, and I was even a guest on Doctors Living Deliberately with another Kim. And I believe we were probably the only non-physician guests other than Arpita's kids, right?
That is 100% true. Yes.
Okay, so that's super cool. And I was happy to reciprocate. So when I started this YouTube channel a year ago, Todd was my first guest on Halloween. And then when Michael was in my first top 5 guests, because I had to book you way ahead. You're a busy guy. And today we'll be talking about how we each have a year of podcasting under our belts. And this is a celebration episode of sorts. And we'll start by sharing any stories or lessons learned from your podcasting experience that you'd like to talk about. And then we'll discuss community and relationships. So I always start by asking what you'd most like our audience to know about you today as we begin our conversation, or we could take it from the frame of where are you in your life right now. Michael, would you like to go first?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot there. I guess I'll start with the podcasting since that's kind of, first of all, congratulations, a year of podcasting. That's amazing. And I think what I would start with is, oh my goodness, it is so much more work than I could have ever imagined. It's so much fun, and I loved having an opportunity to chat with people and have real conversations about things that maybe we as physicians don't always talk about. But man, was it so much work. The recording is what everybody receives, but the work that goes into the planning and the scheduling and just like putting it out into the world and then making sure that other people can find it. I love podcasting, and when my podcast went on a hiatus back in March of 2024, and I was a little bit sad for it to go on the hiatus, but I also like took a huge breath and I was like, okay, yeah, a little bit of breathing room here. So so much fun and so much work, but worth it.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And Todd, where are you in your life right now? What would you like to share?
Oh, wow. Interesting question that could go in just a bunch of directions, I think. First off, I want to say it's great to see you again, Michael, and always Kim. And I would echo what Michael said regarding podcasting. I think it's an amazing opportunity to develop relationships and really to learn. I'm considering whether I'm just going to move into the full-time guest role at this
Mhm.
point, as opposed to hosting it, but to be determined. Yeah, one of the things I'll share that I've been kind of open about is, the way I was taught in medical school was to compartmentalize. And I think Michael probably was in that same era, if I had to guess on it. And recently, all those little boxes that were closed and stuffed into a little room have been opened up. And it took me a little while to figure out that I had never really grieved a lot of those things. And when I realized I was going through that process, it was It's been good. It got a little dark for a while, but the sun is coming back out in a good way, and I'm thrilled to be here. And I guess what I'm trying to convey to the audience is, if that's how you're being taught or in medical school, you need to throw that conventional thinking out the window. Little pockets of compartmentalization is okay, but you need to deal with that trauma and you need to deal with that grief and not stuff it away. That's my suggestion. So, and I'm speaking from experience right now. That's where I'm at, coming out on the other side in a good way. So I'll leave it at that.
I,
Well,
I'll just I can I just add I don't mean to, like, I think that that is so wise and also such an important thing to notice. And I mean, I talk to a lot of physicians every day, and what Todd is referencing is part of our training, and it's also part of our jobs, right? You know, and I've spoken a little bit about this before. You have something horrible happen in one patient room, and then you are the physician and you deal with all of the things that are happening, and you stuff your emotions down because that is our job. And then we are trained to just move on and see the next patient and never go back and process. And that's just one example. Like, that's a patient care example. But we as physicians frequently bring that same kind of way of living into our personal lives as well. And I think what Todd is saying is so important. And, you know, going back and figuring out, maybe we can't process in the moment. Maybe we don't have the luxury of, you know, we have to keep caring for patients throughout the day. But at some point, finding a time to go back and grieve and process and look at the situation, I couldn't agree more. I think it's such a valuable point.
yeah, and thank you, Todd, for sharing that. And I recently rewatched the episodes that I recorded with each of you, and between those two episodes, I think we covered so much. So when I share this one, I'm going to link those, because it's just so important. And thank you both for being, willing to be vulnerable and talk about these things, because I say so much every time a doctor shares their story, another doctor feels less alone, and that's just 100% true. So thank you for sharing. And as we start talking about a little more about podcasting, I have a trivia question. I think Todd likes trivia questions.
Oh Lord, I'm in trouble now. I am like,
Well,
is it on
so
sports or
no, no,
cryptocurrency
it's
or
about
medicine?
podcasting.
All right, then there's hope. There's hope.
Yeah, me and Michael would kind of be out of it if it was about sport. You would win, right? Hands down, Todd, if it was about sports. So the question is, you both you could take a guess. How many episodes does the average podcast last before the host stops the podcast?
Ooh, I actually think it's pretty low. I heard that if you made it past like 6 episodes, you were on track. So I'm guessing with the ones that have, evolved and gotten into the hundreds. All right, let's say I'll double it, 12.
Okay, what's your guess, Michael?
Ooh, I was gonna go, I'm gonna go 10.
Okay, all right. Well, Todd, you were a little closer at first. So, on average, most people will quit their podcast before episode 8.
Oh wow. All right. Hey, but that, you know what? This is good. I feel like we were both in the ballpark. So that
Yeah.
I'm gonna take that as maybe a B minus answer. I'll
Yeah.
take.
I'm not grading you, but I
All
won't
right,
give you
fair
a
enough.
prize either. So it says if you've made it past 8 episodes, well done. You've beaten the odds. So congratulations, gentlemen. And yeah, give yourselves a pat on the back. And to put that into even more context, it's estimated that around 44% of podcasts have 3 or fewer episodes.
Wow.
Wow.
That's interesting. So there must be just this whole cohort that has had like, one or two and then thrown in the towel. Oh wow, that's fascinating. It would be interesting to see sort of the breakdown on like a graphical depiction. I bet it's out there somewhere.
Yeah, right. So I have the episode I share with you guys is going to be like episode number 82. And why don't you guys share how many you've recorded?
Well, I am on episode 34, and I've got episode 35 in the queue to come out, ironically, on election day, which that'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I'm not, and I'm in this transition period. So, at least I help bring the average up some. I don't know if I'll continue to help with that though going forward.
Well, that's okay. I'm just glad that they'll be there for perpetuity, right? So other people can still listen to the wonderful episodes in the future. And Michael, how many did you and Arpita do?
I think Doctors Living Deliberately got up to like 57 episodes or 58 episodes. It ended somewhere in that vicinity. Yeah, I think because yeah. So and what I love about to your point, Kim, is that we're still getting like a bunch of downloads every single week, and so this work lives on. And just back to your other statistic about people, kind of stepping away on average 8 episodes in. I think that probably speaks to the first thing we were talking about is the idea of having a podcast is very appealing. And then you get into it and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I'm going to have to keep having ideas and I'm going to have to keep like figuring this out week after week. It does, it is a lot, but it's also fun.
For sure. So, would either of you like to share any stories or lessons learned from your podcast experience?
Oh wow, we could go in a lot of different directions with this. It's a lot of fun. I think one of the keys is storytelling, and really digging into the emotions, and not being afraid to sort of tackle some of the more difficult topics, if you will, sort of leaning into that discomfort a little bit. And that's where you get the real emotion and humor and honesty and vulnerability and all those things that are going to be key to when we talk about healthcare, turning the ship around a little bit. So from like a personal perspective, it was at times almost like cathartic for me, and some episodes were almost like even therapeutic, really, depending on the topic, which was fascinating. I wasn't expecting that part of it for sure. And in the end, that was one of the things that I really looked forward to. Like Michael said, it was a lot of work, and I would always be like, oh, I'm trying to get two physicians, well, three physicians on the same time frame. Like this is mission impossible. But then every time I would do it, I would have an absolute blast and was glad I had done it. So yeah.
I think for me, it was podcasting was an opportunity to really look my own skepticism in the face, and lean into the discomfort. So I have an incredible amount of respect for physicians at large. And there's also a part of me that has just some real, like really intense skepticism. And so I hear about certain things and I'm like, I don't know. But then to listen to other highly trained, highly skilled physicians talk about topics that I was relatively unfamiliar with and highly skeptical about, and then to gain a new point of view and perspective. This happened on an episode where we were talking about the trauma in medical education. That episode ended up being the third and fourth episodes of Doctors Living Deliberately. It completely turned my perspective of what trauma in medical education is. And it also kind of invigorated me to learn more about trauma. And then I became a trauma informed coach and I started doing some work with kind of trauma informed coaching. Super powerful. And then learning about all of these other, learning about lifestyle medicine, learning about functional medicine, learning about nutrition, all of these things that maybe as an allopathic physician, I had very little knowledge and very little training about, and then getting to sit across the screen from another doctor who was out in the world. And which brings me to my other point, which was that podcasting really gave me a chance to question the identity that I had siloed myself in. One of the big questions that I have started asking myself is like, what does a good doctor do? Because my thought about what a good doctor does, um, 5 years ago versus what I think a good doctor does now are completely different because my point of view was so rigid and so narrow. And getting an opportunity to hear other points of view, to hear about how other doctors are using their medical training and knowledge to really provide care that patients really want and are
Mhm.
seeking. It's been phenomenal, and that was absolutely 100% my favorite part.
That's I got to chime in. That's incredible, and I would agree with you. There's so much learning to be had, and same for me. You know, that sense of Western medicine, if you will, which I was trained in and then grew up as a physician in, over time has very much morphed into, I don't know if East meets West, but being very open minded to all sorts of different types of treatment modalities. And I'll give just maybe one example. We'll had Jill Weiner on the podcast who was talking about tapping. And I was unfamiliar with that modality prior to that, completely intrigued. And since then, my mom's doing tapping and other people are doing tapping. And long and behold, there's evidence to support this. And, you know, it's just incredible. And I agree with you. Like, we grow up in medicine to be a little bit skeptical. And I think we need to unwind that a little bit and be more open minded to these other modalities, in part because we've proven that we spend a lot of money and don't have the greatest outcomes. And there's all these other things out there that you can do that aren't that expensive, you know. So just another thought, I suppose.
Mm. Terrific. Is there anything else you want to share about your podcasting experiences before we move on?
I was joking before we started. How many f bombs I would drop in this episode. I think when I started doing podcasts and getting interviewed, I had a pretty high percentage of expletives as I was going, and that has come down gradually and nicely, I suppose, and not required to emphasize your point. And so, yes, that there's another point of learning, I suppose. But as a Navy guy, you know, you get a little bit of a pass in that, I suppose. So it takes some time to unwind that.
I'll send you a sticker.
As a New Yorker, I used to think I think I get a pass as well, or a recovering New Yorker, as I sometimes refer to myself as. Yeah, and I'll just add, you know, in terms of other kind of things that you get to learn about yourself in the process, is there is zero part of me that, say, 5 years ago would have ever imagined having had a podcast, being able to talk into a camera, being able to have a conversation that then other people can listen to. There was no part of me that thought I could listen to my own voice on a podcast while driving to work in the morning and not completely cringe at the sound of my own voice. And it really is, I think one of the most fun parts of this has really been unlearning all of these things that I used to think and used to just believe were fact for me. It is. It's fun to be able to be like, well, why do I think that? And then how can I shift it and how can I adjust? And so it's cool. Now I like listening to these shows on my commute to work. And I actually will say that I learn something, like Todd was saying, how when he has a guest on, he learns so much from them in the conversation. And I pick up even more when I'm listening to the episode after the fact, because it's one thing to listen to the real-time conversation. It's another thing to be in my car commuting to work and listening to the same conversation and being like, "Oh, I forgot about that," or "Oh, I didn't realize that was happening." So it's pretty neat.
Hmm.
Well, and not only, yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Michael, 100%. Like, I'll listen, you know, because in the moment you have some component of nerves and you're trying to watch the clock and ask questions and pay attention. And you got all these things going on and your mind's like in both. Yeah, you're doing a bit of a juggling act. Whereas when you listen afterwards, you really do just get to soak it in. And I agree with that 100%. But in going through this process too, a couple other things. I feel like it's empowered me, and hopefully it empowers others to feel like they can speak up at times and not have that component of fear, depending on what their situation is, and realize there's a whole bunch of people out there to support them if and when things go awry. And I'll give you another example in terms of when I do public speaking. I'm kind of the guy that I'll have a framework, but then in like 10 seconds, I'm already off the rails and sort of going wherever I think the audience wants to hear it. And I learned a failure bow from a podcast. And so I routinely incorporated that early on into a speaking event. And I was speaking at the MGMA conference, a leadership conference a couple of weeks ago. And I thought it was just going to be a Q&A and a panel. Little did I know that like I was the key speaker in a room of 300 people and was somewhat ill prepared for it. And as a result of all this practice and stuff, it really wasn't that daunting. And it was a lot of fun. And I think the audience received it very well, in part because of this practice from podcasting and talking to other people. So there's just so many things to be gleaned from doing this kind of work, if you will. So
Well, thanks. Well, I love all of that, and I want us to have some time to talk about community and relationships. And I almost forgot I'm wearing my Stand Up for Doctor shirt. I thought this would be the perfect episode to debut it. And so, speaking about connections and community and us, all of us, I have another connection trivia question. This is just for us. So Todd, in our first episode, I shared I was so proud. I had you guess how many connections that you and I shared because we had known each other about 3 months at that point, and it was 411. So now so this morning, oh, and you said even in the episode that, oh, maybe we should celebrate someday when we have 500, when we have 1,000, right? So I'm going to ask each of you to guess how many connections I share with each of you. So Todd, at this point, how many shared connections do you think we have?
oh boy. Oh boy. 1,500.
2,055.
Dang it. I almost said 2002. Dang it.
And Michael, what do you think? How many shared
I was
connections do
actually
you think
also gonna guess around 2000, but I am not sure.
2,192.
Nice.
So it is, but that means that there's so I think Todd and I have like around 9,000 plus connections. So that means there's still around 7,000 people that aren't connected with you, Todd, that should be.
and
And
vice
it's same
and
thing with
vice
you.
versa, right?
Exactly, right. And same thing with you, Michael. So let's hope this gets that number up because they'll see how amazing you are and that you should all be connected.
Kim, can I
And
ask you a question real quick?
you may.
I got to double click on the shirt. Are those available? Can we buy one? How do we get them?
Well, thank you. They aren't yet, but that's something I'm going to have to work on, especially now that I have my logo, thanks to Dr. Charity Hicks. So thank you. I will work on that and get back to you.
Sounds good.
And one other thing I was going to say is just, speaking to our connections, because, when I interviewed you, Todd, I had known you just a few months, and Michael, and it was less than a year then, right? So now it's been, over a year for both of us. And I have every day, I have my Better Physician Life mug sitting right here with me. And then now I have my Rock from Michigan from Todd. So you guys are with me every
Man,
day.
Michael gives better gifts than I do, I'm realizing.
I'm seeing you in November. You can bring me something, Todd.
Yeah, that's right. I'll have to up my game.
So actually, Todd, so this was your idea to speak to this again. So would you like to get us started?
Uh, Hold on. I want to make sure I got the question
Oh,
correct.
no, about
I was
community and
focused on the
relationships.
coffee cup and the rock.
That's okay. All right, about community and relationships.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, that is incredibly important. And um, I actually got a chance to see Joshua Judy earlier this week when we were at a Medicine Forward meeting, and I'll give my plug for Medicine Forward right now. Um, how our relationship evolved in writing the book is just on the verge of magical, in my opinion. It's something that's very unique for the physician and the patient to become really like brothers as a result of that process. But it speaks to the power and the healing power that's potentially there. And with work that we're doing with Medicine Forward to try and bring patient groups and physician groups together to heal those bonds and restore that trust, um, I think Joshua and I's relationship is a microcosm of what is possible. And I guess this is maybe a good opportunity to plug the event in New York City that's coming up at the Burnout Symposium, where we're having an open space technology event that's being led by Medicine Forward and sponsored by the Kern National Network. And I'm super excited for that because it's become clear to me, especially in the last year and a half, how powerful relationships are. I often will title my keynotes or speeches "The Power of One Plus One," and there's a lot of symbolism there. The other beauty of that is I can really take it in whatever direction I want, which I suppose goes with the impromptu kind of stuff. But yeah, relationships are incredibly powerful, and we need to get away from this transactional stuff that's happening in healthcare and get back to the core of it, which really, if you think about it, is relationships.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I echo exactly what Todd was saying. I think, in our medical education and our training, we are surrounded by people and community, and we are in relation with all of our fellow trainees, and there's so much community, and it's this shared experience. And it is what makes all of the challenges of medical education doable. And then we get launched into our careers, and all of a sudden we're completely alone by ourselves and kind of navigating sometimes treacherous waters by ourselves. And I think that is really one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the last couple of years. And it's fascinating. One of the places where I found the most community has been on LinkedIn, like we were just talking about, with all of these connections and being able to meet other like-minded physicians. We were talking about earlier about how skepticism plays a pretty large role in my life. And again, if you had told me 5 years ago that I would like have like a chat with a random physician that I met on LinkedIn through a message, and then we get online and have like a 30-minute conversation just about life and the things that we're doing and how we can support each other. Um, I never would have imagined that life for me, and it's made all the difference. Just recognizing that, there are so many of us that have so much in common. We're all facing the same struggles. And so having a community like Medicine Forward, where we can all kind of come together, problem solve together, it's all the same issues, right? It doesn't matter if you're in Connecticut or Michigan or Illinois or wherever you're living, right? These are the same issues that are impacting healthcare and patients and doctors and all the things. And so when we can come together with a shared voice and say, like, yeah, this isn't working for any of us, what can we do to move ourselves and healthcare forward? So much tremendous impact. It's been great.
I'm just excited just hearing that. That's all I'm going to say. That's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal because there's so much power in numbers in these relationships and these, these conversations that are growing, and you can feel the energy when you get together, right? And people, it's just, it fills up my cup to do this kind of work from an advocacy perspective. So
Well, I love it because when we started connecting on LinkedIn, and I had said to Michael, this is social media though, it's not real life. I'm spending so much time, on LinkedIn, but now I've met at least, 16 doctors in real life, including I've been to your lake house, Todd, right? I've spent the weekend with you. We got
that
stuck
was
on a boat in the lake.
Well, yes, all right. So there were some subtle moments where the trip wasn't ideal. So I'll double click on that for a second. My dad restored a 1957 powerboat, and yes, we did get stuck in the middle of the lake. Fortunately, boaters are very helpful to come to our rescue and pull us back over to the shore. And we hadn't gone that far because there were maybe some warning signs. But yeah, actually to talk about that weekend, we had 7 leaders from Medicine Forward from 7 different states fly into Michigan to meet up and go hang out for the weekend at my lake house. And it was incredible. And those relationships, those bonds, those friendships that have formed really as a result of all this connectivity on LinkedIn are incredible. And the yield from that remains to be seen, right? Because that group is still together doing things like the open space technologies in New York City, and there's going to be more to come. And now we're connecting with these other groups, so that the momentum that has started is only going to continue, in my opinion, and that's just super exciting.
Yeah, and I love it how I was the one that connected the two of you, right? And then you had a conversation, and it was so funny because as soon as you got off the phone with each other, you each texted me, "Hey, I just got off the phone with Michael. Hey, I just got off the phone." And I just think that's so cool. And then some of you guys, you've had people on your podcast, or I have, and then when we've done the Kevin MD articles, and now it feels like a big LinkedIn family, and that you guys really support each other. And then Todd, you've both connected me with people. Then, so go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, no, I mean it really is so powerful. And I think so many doctors don't realize like what that missing piece of community is. And the unfortunate thing for LinkedIn is that most doctors, at least this was my opinion, is they think that LinkedIn is not for doctors. They think LinkedIn is for business people who are looking for a job. And there are other social media sites where they have like groups and community chats, and they all feel so inauthentic and they feel forced and they
Mm.
feel very filtered. And LinkedIn just has never felt that way to me. And I know that there are people that are really genuinely interested in community and connection. And to both of your points, that's exactly what we all need right now. That is part of the healing process. When we talk about trauma, connection mitigates trauma, right? And so all of these things that are happening to us on a daily basis that can be traumatic, it is these communities, it is the connection that is happening that helps us heal, all of us, patients and physicians.
That I agree with everything you just said, Michael, and I would actually like to take it even one step further and maybe circle back to the beginning of the conversation where I was talking about me going through some trauma that I had never unpacked and really grieving. And my LinkedIn posting and interaction went from like daily to like zero over the course of a couple weeks. And the number of people, not just in the United States, not just my friends, not just my family, that reached out to say, "Hey, are you okay? What's going on? What can I do? How can I help you?" From all over the world was incredible. Just people that I've never met in person, only interacted with either via a message or maybe a conversation or two. Um, it just speaks to that connectivity and that relationships, and yes, how that can help us heal. I am a huge fan of LinkedIn. I kind of think this whole interesting network and web that's being created with all these physicians and executives and nurses and PT and that want to change the system. I think we're going to look back on this and go, wow, remember when we all sort of got connected through this cool tool, and now this policy has been changed, as and maybe indirectly, but as a result of that, or this initiative has been done, or this documentary came out, or this person wrote this book. I think we're going to look back on this as a very interesting time in hopefully unwinding some of the mess that currently exists.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I'm just so sorry we have to wind this down now. So I'd just like any closing tips from either of you. You can share anything that brings you joy, any tips for your colleagues, any final words, and also how our listeners can get in touch with you.
Sure, I'll go first. You can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive there. If you're interested in the book I co-authored with a patient, I'll get my last plug in here, Ripple of Change. Um, you can go to rippleofchange.us. A couple things. I talked about it earlier. There's a lot of power in saying no, because if you say yes to everything, you're saying no to something else.
Mhm.
And compartmentalization is fine. I'm okay with that. You have to have the capacity to have a bad outcome if you're a physician or another clinician or whatever, and be able to go to help the next person in the next room, if you will. However, that compartmentalization shouldn't continue for 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, a year, whatever. Get some help, deal with it, unpack it, grieve appropriately, and move on. And if you're struggling to do those things, there are tons of resources out there. I'm not a coach, but I know a lot of coaches. Reach out, join Medicine Forward, contact Michael, contact Kim. There's just so many good people out there who don't want you suffering and struggling, because the epidemic of physician suicide that we're in needs to stop. It just needs to stop. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's very powerful and absolutely agree. And I think so much of our time is spent looking outward at the world and the things and being frustrated at the things that we cannot change. And many of us don't spend any time at all being introspective and looking at the limitations that we're placing on ourselves and how we're holding ourselves back. Because it's true, the system is large and onerous and challenging, and it just feels sometimes like you're banging your head up against a wall. And if you wait for the system to change, nothing is ever going to get better. So in this conversation, we've talked about kind of these, more grassroots style, ways of starting to change the system. And all of that starts with changing ourselves. It starts with recognizing, how am I holding myself back? What are the limiting beliefs that I've placed on myself that are keeping me from really becoming the person that I want to be, right? And Todd, you were just talking about boundaries, like learning to say no. There's so many people out there that are like, "Oh no, I have to do all of these things." And like, do you? Like, is it possible that you don't have to? Is it possible that you can say no? And for those who don't realize it, no is a complete sentence. So it doesn't even require you to explain why you're saying no. But you have to give yourself permission to say no. And all of this begins by looking at yourself, looking at how you're showing up, and then figuring out how you want to be. And so to answer the other part of your question, I am also very active on LinkedIn, love LinkedIn, like we've been talking about today. And then my website is betterphysicianlife.com. Tons of resources there. Kim mentioned the blog. The Doctors Living Deliberately podcast is up there. And with the magic of podcasting, we all love to talk so much, and then our recording got cut off, and so I'm just going to jump right back in and say, for we were talking a little bit about those kind of limiting beliefs and figuring out what you want your life to look like. And again, most of us don't spend enough time or really any time at all doing that. And so I do have a free resource on my website called What's Next. And what's next doesn't have to be leaving clinical medicine, which a lot of physicians think is the only option for happiness, right? What's next is about, what do you want to create in your life? And this is in the next year, in the next 5 years, in the next 25 years. And that's a free resource on the website as well. Again, betterphysicianlife.com.
Michael, that's fantastic. I'm writing notes of things I need to do and putting check boxes next to them, which is a trigger in and of itself, I suppose. I just wanted to put a picture up, and I'm not going to say anything about it, but I'm hoping those that are seeing this can dig into this and unpack it for what it's worth. So forgive my cell phone. Hopefully you can see this.
Okay.
And thanks again, Kim, and great to see you, Michael.
Yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you both. Todd, always great to chat with you. And Kim, thanks so much for having us back on. 1 year. I mean, totally congratulations. Need to celebrate this huge accomplishment and achievement. And I know we're both so happy for you.
Well, thank you both. And I was just so super excited for this episode. I could scarcely contain myself. And as you know, I always end the episode the same way. And when I just rewatched our episode, Todd, I was like, oh, like I almost started crying just because, wow, that was the first time I ever said that. And then I remember when I had Michael on and I was saying it, I started crying. I don't know. It just meant so much to me. So let's see how I do now. But thanks again for being my guest. It just doesn't get much better than this. And people even said that when I was previewing this episode on LinkedIn. They're like, wow, Todd and Michael together. So thanks again. And in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.